name is Kris Flores with Muddy River Catfishing. For those of you who have not heard of me, about 6 years ago I started a YouTube channel, and it kind of took off. People seemed to really enjoy the videos, so we just kept going with it. And 6 years later, here we are. We've got almost 100,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. It led to our own products. We have our own rods, we have terminal tackle, etc. And we even started a guide service here at Elephant Butte Lake. And if you guys ever want information, I do have cards at the table. So yeah, YouTube has been a blessing to us, and it's a great way to get out there, something that I never dreamed about. I know when I was a kid, I used to watch Bill Dance and stuff on TV, and they would ask at school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you know, all the kids would say stuff like fireman and police officer, and in my mind, in the back, I always wanted to be some kind of TV celebrity fishing show, something or another, but I would never say that, right? Because it wasn't realistic back then. But through the power of the internet, it's kind of made my dreams come true. So I do recommend, if anybody wants to get out there, have some product, or just want to make some kind of videos, that look into YouTube. It's a great way, it's a great platform to get your name out there. So introduction, of course, my name is Kris Flores, born and raised here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We covered the Muddy River, and people ask me how long I've been fishing. I've been fishing since I was 6 months old, believe it or not. And there's proof for you. That's me in the little green hat right there. My parents always had me out fishing, and it just kind of stuck. And I've always enjoyed it. It's always been a passion of mine. I honestly believe it's a great way to get out and just get away from the rat race. And I say it's like recharging my soul when I go out there. I come back and I'm ready to take on anything, you know. So whether I catch fish or not, it's just kind of getting out there and clearing your mind, becoming one with nature, making memories with kids and family members and friends. And because to me, that's really what matters most, you know. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk about the types of catfish and their feeding habits. We'll talk about different types of baits, where to find catfish in rivers, lakes, and streams, how to properly handle a catfish, and any questions that you may have at the end of the seminar. Okay, so the three main types of catfish in North America, of course, we've got the blue catfish. And as far as the current New Mexico state records, the current blue catfish record is 52 pounds, 4 ounces. It's 43.5 inches long, and that was caught by David Gower in Elephant Butte Lake back in 2005. And if you guys want to see what a 52-pound catfish looks like, you can go down to Sportsman's Warehouse. We have that replica on display over there. A few years ago when I was doing the show here, a guy came up to my booth and he says, I got something that you might be interested in. I said, oh yeah, what's that? He says, I did the taxidermy for the state record blue cat, and I have a copy, a replica that I want to sell if you're interested. I said, heck yeah, I'll take it from you. So we decided the best place for it for now would be at Sportsman's Warehouse, so that people can see it, you know, instead of being in a trailer or something at my house. So yeah, just to get an idea of what a 52-pound fish is, go down there and check it out. As far as the flathead catfish was also caught at Elephant Butte Lake. That was back in 1979. But this year, 2019, I plan to break that 78-pound record, so that won't be there too much longer. But yeah, 47.5 inches long. Come here, Alex. That's about the size of this guy right here. Imagine a catfish that big. Big old catfish. Channel cat, that was 36 pounds, 8 ounces, 38 inches long. Caught by Julie Cohan at Stubblefield Lake.
When?
I don't have the date on that. No. Blue catfish, let's talk about the blue cat. The characteristics of a blue cat, they have a forked tail, they have a bluish gray skin, They have a longer anal fin than channel cat. That's kind of one of the ways to distinguish the two. And they are opportunistic feeders until they're adult size. Now what I mean by that is catfish in general are pretty much, well, the blue cat and the channel, they're opportunistic feeders until they become adults. And the reason for that is because they want to grow as quickly as possible to become the apex predator in the water. Now once they get to a size where they're comfortable that nothing else is going to eat them, their diet becomes a little more finicky. That's why if you go to Elephant Butte and you're out there fishing with just hot dogs or worms or something, you're catching all these 1 pound blue cats all day long. That's what they're doing. They're trying to fatten up and grow as fast as they can. So once they get to an adult size, they're not so much interested in those kind of baits. They want fresh cut bait, live bait, gizzard shad, stuff like that. As far as the blue cats, they are active in the wintertime. Most people hang up their fishing poles once football season starts and they don't even think about it anymore. But you can get out this time of year and catch a trophy size blue cat. The channel catfish characteristics, they also have a forked tail. They have that shorter anal fin that we talked about. Their coloring is a little different. They're brownish gray in color. The younger fish have spots or speckles, and they are also opportunistic feeders. Once the catfish, the channel cat, gets a little bit older, the spots will start to disappear, and that's kind of when the confusion starts in as to identifying whether it's a blue cat or a channel. The main thing, like I said, is to look at the anal fin, and if it's shorter, then it's a channel cat, and if it's longer, it's the blue cat. The flathead catfish, that right there is my personal favorite species to catch, and you can obviously see how different it is from the other two. Characteristics, it has a square tail, it has a mottled yellow or camouflage color on the skin, and it's a predatory feeder, and it has an underbite in comparison to the other two have an overbite. And that underbite is, it's a lot like a bass. You think about a black bass or a white bass or striped bass, any kind of bass, they have that lower jaw that sticks out past the upper jaw. And the reason for that is because they're predatory. These flatheads are looking for live bait to feed on. So their eyes are located more on top of their head. That's why they have that flat. Some people call them shovel heads. They're constantly looking up to see what's swimming by. And with that lower jaw protruding out, it gives them that ability to strike upward. So live baits for those fish, guys. Are catfish nocturnal? So some people believe that you can only catch catfish at night. Now here's why they think that. Catfish have good eyesight. Most people don't believe that they have good eyesight. They think that they're semi-blind or whatnot, but they have what's called an imbalance of cones and rods in their eye. They have more cones than rods, which gives them eyesight similar to that of a cat. So they have the ability to open up those pupils really wide and take in what little light there is, so they can see what they're hunting for. Because these catfish are hunters, they're predators, they're not bottom feeders. So, like I said, it gives them better night vision, and also they prefer cloudy days. So when you have a cloud cover, it'll help them be more active. Can catfish hear? Catfish can hear. They have ears below the surface of their skin. It is similar to the inner ear of a human, so they can pick up on tones in the water. Absolutely, they can hear. What are chemoreceptors? I think that's the biggest word in my vocabulary, chemoreceptor. A chemoreceptor is basically a fancy name for taste buds. They are found not only on the whiskers of the catfish, but they are also found all over their body. And this gives the catfish the ability to taste the water with any part of its body. Now, what I mean by that is they're basically like a swimming tongue, as weird as it sounds. So you can throw your bait out, the fish can swim close to it without even touching it, and it can actually taste the bait before it even puts it in its mouth and decides if it wants to bite it or not. So they're just a big sensory organ. These catfish are amazing. You'll see. Do catfish have a sixth sense? Catfish do have a sixth sense. They have what's called a lateral line. Show them where the lateral line is. If you see that defined line right there that runs along the body of a catfish, that is called the lateral line. It gives the fish the ability to sense vibration or fish in distress. This is why anglers catch catfish on artificial lures. So a lot of people that fish for bass, they think, oh, you know, what a fluke! I caught a catfish on a wally diver or on a jig or something, and they think it's just, you know, some crazy catfish that's just starving to death or something. But they're actually, like I say, they're predatory fish. They pick up on these vibrations that are the water being displaced. They think it's a bait fish in distress, and they attack it. And that's why they catch them on artificials. What is a swim bladder? So catfish have what's called a swim bladder. It allows the fish to float effortlessly at any depth. Catfish are not bottom feeders, and this swim bladder is a perfect example of why. So what the catfish does, it has this basically like a balloon inside its body, and it can inflate and deflate it as it feels necessary to suspend itself at any given depth. So if the fish that they're feeding on, let's say there's a school of threadfin sitting at 20 foot deep in 40 foot depth of water, they can put enough air in that swim bladder to suspend them at that 20 foot depth so that they can feed comfortably and not have to constantly be swimming to eat at that depth. So that's why they are not bottom feeders. So the combination of these traits, characteristics, create the ultimate predator, which I truly believe catfish are the ultimate predator. Misconception of them being bottom feeders, I'll give you a perfect example. Try to imagine how many catfish, just catfish, are in any given lake. Let's say Elephant Butte. How many catfish do you think are swimming in that lake? Thousands and thousands and thousands of them, right? Now, if they were bottom feeders, how much food would have to be just dead at the bottom of that lake to sustain those fish? The math doesn't add up. There's not enough dead stuff down there. So these fish have to be predatory to survive, and that's why they are the ultimate predator. With all of these sight, sound, lateral line, taste, all these senses make them an ultimate predator. So let's talk about different types of baits. As you see here, we've got some cut bait, we've got live bait, stink baits, shrimp, chicken livers, worms. These are all typical baits that you would use to catch catfish. How do I know which bait to use for what type of catfish? So of course there's the three. So we'll categorize the baits by their species. Channel cat. Channel cat is probably the easiest to catch. They're the best one. That you get kids, you want to take them out, get them on some channel cats, get them started, get them hooked on it. They'll pretty much eat anything. Since they're smaller, they're just more active, I think, in some sense. You can catch them on any one of these. If you're fishing cut bait or maybe some minnows and stuff, something smaller than that live bait there, stink baits, shrimp, chicken liver, worms, all of that stuff will catch you some channel cats. Blue catfish. So the blue cats, they're a little bit more picky. You can, and there's no exact chart. I mean, you'll catch one on this bait, you'll catch one on that bait, but just to kind of give you an idea of how to narrow it down, I'd get rid of the stink bait and I'd get rid of some of the other stuff, but cut bait, chicken liver, live bait, and shrimp, you'll catch some juvenile and bigger blue cats. Flathead catfish. Flathead catfish, like I said, they're a different type of species, and they really only want fresh cut bait or a lively bait. Something swimming around putting out that vibration that they can attack and feed on. So live bluegill, live gizzard shad, all those will catch you a nice flathead catfish. Now you want to catch a trophy-sized catfish. As you can see, these guys here, this guy from In Fisherman, I think that was a 90-plus pound blue cat that he caught. And Flathead Ed from Arizona, he still holds the state record flathead over there. Let's see how they were doing it. Use big baits. Big baits. As you can see, that piece of cut bait that they have in their hand there is a big slice of bait. I mean, it's the size of their whole hand. And of course, you see that suckerfish over there. Arizona guys, here in New Mexico, it's illegal to use carp live as bait, but the guys in Arizona are throwing 2, 3, 4 pound carp as bait. Believe it or not, they'll put a big old hook in the front, they'll put a treble hook as a stinger in the back, and they're throwing those out trying to catch these big 70-plus pound catfish. And believe it or not, with a 4-pound bait, they're pulling in 20-pound catfish. You know, a catfish will attack anything that's slightly smaller than it. So there's no such thing that I think is too big of a bait. I know when I first started fishing for catfish and I saw a bluegill on a hook, I thought, man, there's no way that a catfish is gonna fit that thing in its mouth. There's no way he's gonna eat that, you know? But then I hooked into a big catfish and I reeled it in, and when I held that bluegill to his mouth, it looked like a little cracker to the fish. So it's all in relativity, you know, and how it relates to one another. If you're stuck in that range and you're catching 5-pounders and less, then a big bluegill, it looks like it's way too much bait. But if you want to get into those bigger fish, don't be afraid to throw big baits. Now, I'll tell you something. It came up to one of these things where, do I want to catch fish or do I want to hope to catch a big fish? And in New Mexico, you're allowed 2 rods. So when I first started transitioning to bigger fish, I would have 1 rod with a big bait on it, and then I have another rod with smaller baits like shrimp and worms and whatnot. And that smaller rod had more action by far because I'd be catching all these little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-pounders. But when that big rod went off, man, I had the fish of a dream, you know, a dream fish of a lifetime on the end of that rod, 20-plus pound catfish. So if you want to go out there and target, it's all in what you want to target. If you want to target some eaters, use the smaller baits. If you want to target a fish of a lifetime, use some bigger baits. If you want to do both, use 1 rod with each different type of bait on it. Now here's some rigs, common rigs to use while fishing for catfish. This one's called the Carolina rig. Your main line is a 65-pound braided line. That's my preference. Use a slip sinker, and as far as the weight of the sinker, all you need is, the only purpose of a sinker is to keep the weight or the bait down, and the only time you change the weight is to adjust for whether you've got current or any kind of water condition that would affect how to keep that bait to the bottom. Then you have a barrel swivel, 50-pound monoleader, and an 8-aught circle hook. Now the reason for the smaller test pound line in the leader versus the main line, and you can see there's a 15-pound difference. That way, if you get hung up with your hook, you can pull that line and it'll break between the swivel and the hook, and you'll just lose the hook. You're not losing your entire rig. So you reel that in, you just put another leader on, put another hook on, and you're good to go. Kentucky rig. This is actually one of my favorite rigs. I prefer this over the Carolina rig because I believe that getting your baits off of the bottom is going to catch you more fish. Like I said, catfish are not bottom feeders. They will pick stuff up off the bottom, but putting the bait off of the bottom will give the catfish a better chance to get to your bait. So this rig right here, you can see it's got 2 dropper. It has 2 dropper knots off to a couple of 8-aught hooks with some cut bait, and then of course you can space the between the knots as you see fit. One thing I do I do think about that Carolina rig that we saw earlier is if you're fishing in some place that's got current or a lot of structure on the bottom, and that bait is sitting right on the bottom, the current can push it underneath the log, it can push it in between some rocks, it can get it in a place where the catfish can't get to it. So you may think, oh, I'm sitting here, I'm not catching anything, I'm not getting any bites, maybe I'll move, but truth be told, the fish are trying to get to that bait, but they can't because it's hidden. So if you are using a Carolina rig or something that's sitting on the bottom, my advice to you is if you don't get a bite within 15 minutes, either reel it in and recast it, or maybe reel it in a few cranks to move it a little bit, to make sure that that bait is exposed to the fish. Understanding rivers. Rivers can be intimidating. Learning to identify the channel, learn to identify shallow water, and learn how to find the holes. When I first started fishing the river, I had no clue where to fish. It all looked the same to me. Just staring out at the river, it's just a bunch of water. I just toss my line out in the middle and hope for the best. And as I started learning about it, I learned how to look at the river, know where the shallow water is, know where the deep water is, and know where the holes are. A lot of that came from me just swimming in there and finding it out that way too. But let's click on to the next one and see. So the channel or the current. The channel is the main water flow in a moving body of water. It creates an S pattern as it flows from bank to bank, and it can be distinguished by the smooth swirling surface, and it's likely to hold fish. Now this picture right here, I took it just down here off of Shalem Colony. So I mean it's just any given stretch of river between, probably from below Hatch all the way down past El Paso. You're gonna find a river that looks like this. And there's holes and all along, and you're gonna find out how to find it right here. So looking at these pictures side by side, you can see the main channel. The main channel, like I said, is the deepest part of the river, and you see that smooth surface water as it comes, and it makes that S swirl, and it comes from bank to bank, and that is your main channel. Locating shallow water. Shallow water is identified by rough or choppy moving water, and it's less likely to hold fish. Right there you can see where all that shallow water is, and what you're doing when you're doing this is you're trying to cut out the water that you don't want to fish. You identify the areas that you don't want to fish, and then you focus on where the fish are going to be. So finding the holes. The holes are the deepest part of the river. They can be identified where the channel meets the bank. It's the best place to find the fish. And the best holes also include cover such as fallen tree, branches, rocks, etc. So looking at this diagram, you can see where the main channel hits that bank on the top. So what's happening is the water is flowing and it's cutting across that river, and then it hits that bank and it has to deflect and find somewhere else to go. So as it turns and goes the other way, it's digging out the sand or the mud that's there and making a hole, and it takes that and it deposits down the way, and then it just does that. When it hits the next bank, it just does that again and again and again. So all up and down the river there's holes. You just have to look for that main channel and where it hits. And now we didn't do the demonstration. Finding the holes, of course, if you can find a hole and find a fallen tree or maybe a bunch of boulders in there and stuff, that's prime area for not only catfish but fish in general. So when I fish the river, a lot of times if there's a bridge close by, I'll just drive over it and I'll kind of glance down and I can see where that S pattern's coming, and if I see where it's hitting the bank, if I see something that looks good, maybe like a branch or something in there, I'll just go over there and I'll find that hole and I'll fish it. I did a demonstration here on shallow water, but let's see, I don't know, see if you can make it play. We couldn't play it yesterday. It won't play? Yeah, basically I did a demonstration. I was just showing where the shallow water meets the deep water and how it changes. And so what I do is I'm standing in the shallow water, and as you can see from the previous pictures that I showed you, oh, there it goes. So you can see right here that it's that fast moving choppy water, and obviously it's just a little bit over my ankles. So that would really, it would be a waste of time to throw your line out there. There would be no sense in fishing that area. Now behind me, you start to see that smooth water. And watch as I step over to where that smooth water is. Look how deep it is right there. You see? And that is the head of the hole where that S pattern comes and hits that bank. And that's where you want to start fishing. You find that smooth water in those rivers, and and when I'm fishing those rivers, I'm casting right off the bank. I'm not casting way out there. I'm just pitching it right there because that's where the deepest spot is. Run is, let's say it's maybe you got 3 foot of water, and it's flowing over maybe a muddy bottom. Then all of a sudden you find the water finds a rock bed. Well, it's going to get shallow because it can't move those rocks, and it's going to move faster across those rocks. Once it finds mud again or soft bottom, it's going to dig out a hole, and that's what the deepest part of that stream is going to be. So here's a little video I did of explaining it. So this is just a stretch of river, and it's all uniform. This is what's called the run. It's probably, this piece right here is probably maybe 2 foot deep as far as the eye can see. And you'll have fish moving in and out of this area feeding. They like to get behind these branches, these little bushes in the slack water, but they'll move all up and down. All that water is the same depth. It's all constant. Now once that water, you see how we start to find rock?
Good afternoon, all guests and vendors. Our concession stand will be closing at 3 o'clock today. Make sure you make your way over to get the delicious snack.
See rock? You see all the rock? Now you see how the water is gotten shallower and it's moving faster. Now this water here, like, it's probably ankle deep and it's not worth fishing. You're not really going to find fish in this water. I'm sure in the video itself I'm seeing a lot more cooler stuff than what I am now, but you guys get the hint. Now the hole. So that fast water is moving along, and now it's starting to change because it found a soft bottom again. And what it does is, because that water's moving so fast, it's just like if you have the water hose and you're spraying the dirt, it digs that hole out. That's what's happening here, but on a bigger scale, and it's making a deep spot right there. Right back there where you see that smooth water in between those two stumps. That's a nice deep hole, I guarantee you. So when I would fish this, I would fish that smooth water just on the side right there. And those fish are coming right up there. They're waiting to see what the water's bringing down. They're just waiting there like the buffet line. Okay, where to find fish in lakes? Lakes can be tricky because they're big bodies of water, but points are a great place to find fish. They provide ambush points for feeding fish. You can fish directly off the main point as well as on each side. Try different depths until you locate the fish. So a good idea when you find a point is, one of my favorite points is a point that goes all the way to the channel. Catfish or fish in general like to use that incline to move from deep water to shallow water to feed. So get on that point, throw your line out, try to locate where the fish are as far as the depth wise. Once you find that, just focus on that area and you'll catch fish. Rocky ledges or drop-offs. These areas attract bluegill, shad, and bass. They provide excellent nesting areas for catfish. Bass, bluegill, crappie, catfish, and carp can be caught by jigging a night crawler around and between the rocks. One of my favorite things to do is I'll get out there in midsummer and spring and even early fall, and I'll just take a number 8 hook and a piece of night crawler, and I'll find a ledge like this, and I'll just jig it, no weight or anything, just let it fall naturally, and we'll catch tons and tons of bluegill. But on top of the bluegill, we'll catch bass and catfish, crappie, everything. It's a great way to target fish, but it's also a great way to load up on bait, especially if you want to target those big catfish. So get out there, just jig a little night crawler in these rocks, catch a bunch of bluegill, keep them alive for the nighttime. Flooded timber, that's also an excellent area for feeding flathead catfish. Flathead catfish move into shallow water to feed at night, and they can be caught in depths of even 4 foot of water. I think the shallowest water I've ever fished and successfully pulled out a fish over 20 pounds was about 18 inches of water. It was so shallow that when I pulled that fish out, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't see the back of the fish swimming across the water, you know. But they do move in that shallow water, and they will feed in those shallow depths. How to hold a small catfish. So being stung or finned by a smaller catfish can be avoided by proper handling of a fish. Trap one of the pectoral fins between the pointer and the middle finger. Support the other pectoral fin with your thumb. Now, people ask me about catfish being poisonous. Go to the next clip. People ask me about catfish being poisonous, and the fins, they do have a mild poison on them, I guess you could say. It's more like an ant bite or something like that. It's not going to kill you, but the smaller the catfish, the more it hurts, you know. And the reason for that is it's their defense mechanism against getting eaten by a larger predatory fish. So as the fish grows, gets bigger, those points, they get rubbed on rocks and structure, and they dull out. So the bigger the fish, the less problem you're going to have getting stuck. But the smaller the fish, the more you need to be careful handling them. Now, how to hold a larger catfish. If you are planning on catching a catfish for sport and you want to just catch him, take a picture of it, maybe catch a personal best fish and release it, this is the ideal way of how to handle it. You support the weight of the fish by placing one hand under the body. Hold the fish by the mouth with the other hand. Avoid placing hands and fingers in or around the gills. Any damage to the gills may cause death. A lot of guys will grab a big fish like this by the jaw and just hold it up like that, and you're putting all that weight onto their jaw, which can dislocate it or injure the fish, and it's not a good idea. That's why you need to support that weight of the fish from the underneath of the belly. Let's go to the next one. What is CPR? CPR is something that kind of took off in the last few years, that a lot of guys that catch and release, kind of doing it for the sport instead of for eating the fish, came up with, and it stands for catch, photograph, and release. It is recommended to release trophy-sized catfish or fish in general so that they may continue to spawn and help ensure trophy-sized fish for the future generations. I personally release 95% of the fish that I catch, and of the 5% that I catch, the ones I keep are 5 pounds or less. Now, the reason for keeping the smaller ones is because the bigger ones have been around for years, and not only are they passing on the genetics of trophy-sized catfish to the generations ahead of them, but they also have collected toxins throughout the years. They store these toxins in their body fat, and it does not go away. So it's just accumulated throughout the years. So pesticides and mercury and all that stuff. So the bigger the fish, the more you're consuming yourself. So you take a 1 pound, 2 pound catfish, 5 pounds or less even, they haven't been around as long, they're healthier, they're cleaner, they don't have all that pollution inside of them. So my recommendation, if you do want to catch fish to eat, 5 pounds or less is ideal. And that concludes our seminar. As far as the seminar itself, anybody have questions for me? No questions?
So that big fish that you had right there, one of the last ones, how old is it?
How old is a big catfish? It's hard to say. Usually a 40 plus pound catfish in our area would probably be maybe 20 years old or so. Catfish in warmer parts and the southern parts of the southern parts of the states, because there's the climate's warmer, they grow faster. If you're up in the northern states, because it's so cold, they don't grow as fast. So a smaller fish up there may be 20 years old and it's only 10 pounds or so, But
so CPR the bigger ones.
CPR the bigger ones.
Yeah, CPR the bigger ones.
Eat the little ones if you want to have a fish fry. Absolutely. Yes, sir. He's talking about water temperature and the importance of that. So catfish are cold-blooded animals. So whatever the water temperature is, that's going to be the body temperature of the fish. So they look for warmth. So even if it's a couple degrees difference, they're going to look for that. So if let's say you're at the lake and you're fishing and it's 48 degrees, if you find a spot where the water's like 50 or 51, you're gonna probably have a better chance of catching fish in that warmer water. They do look for that in the winter time. Anybody else? All right, guys, I want to thank you for attending our seminar, and thanks for coming out to the Mesilla Valley Outdoor Expo. We look forward to seeing you guys next year. Thank you.